Hello everyone. Today we're gonna do our third discussion board, and this way we'll be discussing about the Lulz Sec, the hacker group most widely connected to it. The Lulz Sec was part of a larger group online, so collectively they called Anonymous. They gained notoriety for hacking into the big organizations, which made them famous among others, the government agencies and big corporations. What makes them distinct isn't what they did, but why they said they did it. Um, these hacks included leaks of sensitive information and statements that, in fact, were meant to lay bare security problems and champion the rights of individuals and institutions, especially in cases like WikiLeaks. But at the same time, they also claimed that part of the motivation was actually entertainment. For me, that presents a significant ethical dilemma. In this presentation, I'm going to talk about how I evaluate their activities, whether I agree with what they did, and under what conditions activism can actually be considered ethical. So let's go to the background and context. In order to understand this case properly, so we have to take a look at the background. Lulz Sec sprang from Anonymous, which is not your average organization, but rather a decentralized online community. Members of this group strongly believe information is and should be free and accessible to the masses. Because of these beliefs, they backed WikiLeaks when it released confidential government documents. On PayPal and Visa chase supporting WikiLeaks, these hackers responded by hacking those companies' systems. They also perform other massive actions, like for example, they briefly shut down the CIA website and hacked into Sony, exposing personal information from thousands of users. But what complicates the situation is their motivate. They claimed they were trying to expose weak security system, but they also acknowledged they were doing it for fun. So that leaves us with a crucial question. Are these people activists seeking to enact change, or simply creating disruption as a source of entertainment? So on the third point, ethical evaluation of Lulz Sec. So what I want to analyze now is done from an ethical standpoint. First, consider consequences. Lulz Sec did reveal legitimate security flaws, though. With those people exposing these flaws, companies may not take cybersecurity seriously. In that regard, their behavior may be considered constructive, but they were also doing serious damage. They released personal information of thousands of people who had nothing to do with the situation. So those were not the individuals that put corporate security at risk, but the ones who became victims. So we have to ask, can innocent people be hurt to expose a bigger problem? So in my opinion, it's not. Next, let's turn to the individual rights. So each individual has a right to privacy and data security. Lulz Sec violated those rights when they hacked the systems and revealed personal information. And however well-meaning, they were in trying to publicize a violation of fundamental rights is ethical troubling. So finally, let's examine their behavior and character. It raises serious concerns when members of Lulz Sec say they were doing this for the fun of it. And the ethical activism is often about responsibility, about purpose. When the basis of the actions is entertainment, it makes it difficult to justify doing it as morally right. So overall, while their actions may have had some positive results, the manner that they achieved them raises very serious ethical concerns. So do I agree with their actions? First of all, I would like to answer this question directly. Do I agree with Lulz Sec's actions? My answer is going to be partially, but mostly no. I understand the nationality behind what they were trying to do, so which transparency is important. This is how governments and corporations can be held accountable, and exposing failures can help them to improve. but vehemently disagree with the way they behaved. First, their actions hurt innocents. So when personal data is leaked, it's not just companies that are affected, it's ordinary users. So such damage cannot be rationalized. Second, they would sidestep accountability. In traditional methods of protest, such as civil disobedience, people are generally prepared to face the consequences of their actions. Lulz Sec, by contrast, operated anonymously and avoided responsibility. Third, their motivations are suspect. They weaken their credibility as activists when they say they did it for fun, but it implies that they were not acting entirely out of ethical obligation. So I guess this is what I would say as a summary of my position. I agree with their goals, but I definitely disagree with their approach. When is hacktivism morally acceptable? This leads to the most important question: when can hacktivism actually be considered ethical? I believe it can be ethical, but only under strict conditions. First, there must be a legitimate purpose, such as exposing corruptions or protecting public interest. It should not be done for entertainment or personal gain. Second, harm should be minimized, so this means avoiding actions that affect innocent individuals, such as leaking personal data. Third, the action should be proportional. The level of disruption should match the seriousness of the issue. The fourth, it should be a last resort. If there are legal and safer ways to address the issue, those should be the attempted first. And then finally, there should be some level of accountability. Ethical action requires responsibility. When these conditions are met, hacktivism can be similar to whistleblowing, which can be morally justified. However, when these conditions are ignored, it becomes unethical and closer to cybercrime. So the real-world relevance. This topic is highly relevant in today's world. We frequently hear about the data breaches and cyber attacks, but we also hear about ethical hackers, professionals who are hired to test and improve security systems. The key difference is consent and responsibility. Ethical hackers operate with permission, follow rules, and focus on improving systems without harming individuals. This shows that the same technical skills can be used in either ethical or unethical ways depending on intent and method. So if we come up to the conclusions section, as such, the Lulz Sec case highlights how complex ethical dilemmas can be in the internet age. On the one hand, they laid bare legitimate and important security vulnerabilities and show that organizations of a scale and power aren't always as secure as they profess. Exposure to kind can make improvements and raise awareness of cybersecurity. However, on closer examination, we can see that their conduct caused serious harm, particularly in terms of exposing personal data, thereby affecting individuals who did not contribute anything. For much of the traditional protests, such as civil disobedience, people want to be willing to suffer consequences for their actions only because they strongly believe in their cause. Lulz Sec alternatively worked anonymously and was not responsible for the destruction they inflicted. It makes it very hard to call their behaviors ethical activism. It also begs the question, if the parties that do the action are unwilling to accept their responsibilities for the evacuation, then can its actions actually be called moral? I think the Lulz Sec falls somewhere between an activist group and cyber criminal group. Despite their stated goals of informing the public, taking on the complex system, critically, they went over the line of what was ethical. The key learning from this case is that good intentions alone aren't enough. How actions end up being carried out needs to be an equal as much consideration. In our current digital environment, in which one acts on one's own may have implications for any numbers of others and are highly immediate, it's critically important to emphasize responsibility, minimization of harm, and upholding of the rights of others. So, end of my presentation. Thank you for listening.